A great WWE feud should, in theory, culminate with a major blow-off match. Ideally, said match will take place on a pay-per-view, or premium live event if you prefer. You know, in the interest of making money and memories and all that good stuff. That is usually how things go, but there have been some instances where a red-hot feud, or feud that had the potential to be red-hot, was either ended on regular television or, in a few cases, never even made it that far, despite deserving a bigger stage. I'm Adam Pachisi from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 great WWE feuds that never had a pay-per-view blow-off. Join us! Number 10, Booker T vs. Steve Austin. Booker T made an immediate impact in his WWE debut. The former WCW heavyweight champion interfered in the main event of the 2001 King of the Ring pay-per-view, blasting WWE champion Steve Austin through the announce table. You would reckon that the notoriously tetchy Stone Cold would want revenge after such a sneak attack, but Austin had unfortunately gotten injured on the bump and would be out of action for the best part of a month. His return came in a tag match on SmackDown with Booker on the opposite side of the ring. Austin managed to hit a stunner on his nemesis before abandoning the bout in order to save his wife Deborah from being abducted by that rapscallion Diamond Dallas Page. Days later, the two Texans fought in the 10-man tagger invasion, with Austin shockingly betraying Team WWE and joining the alliance in its conclusion. His feud with Booker was then put on ice until the invasion angle had run its course, after which they had several matches on television, as well as the fantastic brawl in a supermarket. Never did make it to pay-per-view though, because bottom line, Vince McMahon evidently didn't see it as marketable enough. Sucker! Number 9, Bray Wyatt vs. Brock Lesnar. Bray Wyatt and his lovely family targeted Brock Lesnar in early 2016, using their numerical advantage to get the better of the beast on multiple occasions. This included in the Royal Rumble, where a 4-on-1 attack led to Brock's elimination. Lesnar didn't immediately go after their collective heads, however, as he was too concerned with trying to get a WWE title opportunity at WrestleMania by beating Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose at Fastlane. When that didn't quite work out, WWE went back to the Wyatt well and booked Brock against Bray for the Roadblock WWE Network special. However, the Eater of Worlds suffered a back injury in the run-up to the event. Rather than take him out of the equation entirely, WWE rejigged it so Wyatt teamed with Luke Harper in a 2-on-1 handicap match. Lesnar promptly ate Harper up in about 4 minutes, with Bray refraining from getting physically involved. So, would the match finally happen when he was suitably recovered? Nope. WWE opted to quietly squash the beef and move both men on to different things, which is a shame because a pay-per-view match between them had real potential. Number 8, Rey Mysterio vs. Andrade. It didn't quite work out for Andrade in WWE, but for a while there it really felt as though the company had their next big Hispanic superstar on their hands. And never more so than when he was in the ring with fellow luchador Rey Mysterio. Against the legendary Masked Man, El Idolo was able to routinely demonstrate the full range of his abilities. And I do mean routinely, because he and Rey had plenty of opportunities to showcase their chemistry on TV. Between the summer of 2018 and spring of 2020, the two had 8 televised singles matches, not to mention plenty of other tag and multi-man matches, including bouts with 2 out of 3 falls and ladder stipulations. Often contested with the United States title on the line, the matches always impressed. But despite being a highlight of SmackDown and then Raw, WWE never let them loose on pay-per-view. The only time they clashed on what is now referred to as a premium live event was at Fastlane 2019 in a 4-way also featuring Samoa Joe and R-Truth. Even then, they only got on the main show after initially being booked in a singles match on the pre-show. Number 7, The Undertaker vs. The Ultimate Warrior. Two of the most over-the-top and recognizable characters of their era, The Undertaker and The Ultimate Warrior were a tremendous contrast to one another. One was a face-painted, neon-soaked 100 miles per hour jacked-up babyface, while the other was a jet-black heel who moved at a zombie's pace. It was a great attraction on paper, and WWE booked it countlessly throughout the spring and summer of 1991 while the two were at odds on television. This included many body bag and a few casket matches on the road. Sounds like the sort of novel thing that folks would pay to see, but almost all of the Undertaker vs Ultimate Warrior matchups took place on house shows, with a couple of them filmed for broadcast on the MSG network or as Coliseum home video exclusives. WWE only ran 5 pay-per-views in 1991, and the only one WWE could have realistically booked the match for was SummerSlam. Warrior infamously held up Vince McMahon for cash at the show and was immediately suspended following his performance in Madison Square Garden that night. When he returned the following year, the dead man was a babyface, and they actually teamed up a handful of times rather than square off against one another. Number 6, Jerry Lawler vs King Booker. Booker T's King Booker phase was a riot as the hard-grafting veteran turned the silliness up to 11 and became the top dog on SmackDown, reigning for 6 months as the Blue Brand's World Heavyweight Champion. Drafted to Raw in the summer of 2007, King Booker quickly found a natural adversary in the form of Jerry Lawler. Declaring that Lawler could no longer refer to himself as a king, Booker targeted the announcer and sometimes wrestler, leading to a couple of matches between the two. Their bout on the July 30th episode of Raw ended with a disqualification victory for Jerry when Booker went ham on him in the corner, resulting in a rematch the following week with the added stipulation that the loser had to crown the winner the week after. Booker won that one thanks to an assist from Queen Sharmell, but Lawler refused to crown him when the time came. Not because he wanted to string the program out until SummerSlam and blow it off properly, but because this feud was just a time killer until the King of Kings Triple H returned at the pay-per-view and pedigreed Booker T all the way to TNA. Number 5, Eric Bischoff vs Vince McMahon. If one match pretty much sold itself based on real-life history, it was a showdown between Eric Bischoff and Vince McMahon. Bischoff has spent years fighting WWE and trying to put McMahon out of business, and even challenged him to a real fight on pay-per-view, only to ultimately fail in his endeavor. So why wouldn't the former SVP of WCW want to go after the genetic jackhammer when he came to WWE in 2002? And vice versa for that matter. Well, WWE threw the easy money straight into the fire by quashing the real-life rivalry on Eazy-E's first night in as a talent when he was introduced by Vince as the Raw general manager with a big old bear hug. The two would nonetheless butt heads during Bischoff's 3.5-year stay and did end up on opposite sides of the ring in the main event of the February 23rd, 2004 episode of Raw. The action was rotten, as expected, and the brief match was basically little more than an excuse to have Brock Lesnar interact with special guest referee Steve Austin. Had WWE built it up effectively and added some wacky stipulations, you would think that people would have paid for the privilege. Number 4, the Legion of Doom vs Demolition. Ooh, what a crushing missed opportunity this was. Demolition were, in many respects, WWE's answer to the hugely popular Road Warriors, with Axe and Smash sharing many characteristics with Hawk and Animal and ruling the WWE tag division in a dominant style akin to the way the Warriors had in the NWA. So, when the rechristened Legion of Doom joined WWE in 1990, fans eagerly anticipated a matchup between the two units. And it looked like things would go that way too when LOD cost Demolition the tag titles at SummerSlam. But the payoff never really came, at least not on television or pay-per-view. WWE booked the straight tag match on various house shows, but televised meetings usually added Crush and WWE champion The Ultimate Warrior, turning them into six-mans. Demolition and the Legion of Doom did have the opportunity to throw down on pay-per-view when they were booked on opposite teams at Survivor Series, but they barely interacted before they were all eliminated early on. Had the feud happened a year or two earlier, prior to Axe's health issues, it might have had more intensity and led to a big money match on an order-only event. Number 3, Damien Sandow vs The Miz. A happy accident in many ways, the partnership between The Miz and Damien Sandow, aka Mizdow, was a great example of the talent taking something and running with it until it got over big. The Miz's stunt double was a riot as he mimicked the supposed A-listers' movements, took bumps from imaginary adversaries, and generally elevated the whole copycat routine to another level. The pair even became tag team champions, but lost them as hints of dissension began to creep in. It was inevitable that The Miz would get fed up with his avatar, especially as Sandow's popularity grew. And so it came to be when he demoted him from stunt double to personal assistant. The big split was brewing and came, fittingly, on the grandest stage of them all. Well, the grandest pre-show of them all, as Mizdow finally turned on Miz in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal at WrestleMania 31. The reaction Sandow received from the tens of thousands in attendance really should have convinced WWE that they had a hot match on their hands. Regrettably, Miz and Sandow simply traded lukewarm victories on Raw, with Miz winning the feud for good and relegating the intellectual savior of the masses to the bottom of the card. Number 2, Ric Flair vs Hulk Hogan. When Ric Flair jumped from WCW to WWE, carrying the NWA heavyweight title belt with him and proclaiming himself to be the real world's champion, a pay-per-view match with WWE champion Hulk Hogan seemed all but guaranteed. The Nature Boy and the Hulkster began feuding on television and looked set to collide at WrestleMania 8. Like, seriously, they announced the match for Flair's newly won WWE title and everything. But what are you gonna do, brother, when the house shows don't draw particularly well and the matches themselves fall flat on you? Yes, whether it was the apparent tepid live reactions or the subpar box office that Hogan and Flair drew on the road, WWE were convinced to change things up at the Showcase of the Immortals. And so, Rick defended against Randy Savage while Hulk threw down with Sid Justice. WWE neglected to book the Flair-Hogan match on pay-per-view, though WCW did it many times in later years. Vince McMahon had a second opportunity to put it on pay-per-view in 2002, but booked the match as a Raw main event instead. It would have only been a decade too late, to be fair. Number 1, John Cena vs Christian. After years of threatening to break out of the mid-card pack, 2005 looked like the year Christian would finally join the main eventers club. His route to that club seemed to be a feud with the ascendant John Cena. It was teased with a confrontation at that year's Royal Rumble, and Captain Charisma continued to taunt the Doctor of Thugonomics in promos ahead of Cena being drafted to Raw in the summer. They had another face-to-face as soon as Big Match John made the switch, and all evidence indicated that a WWE title showdown would go down at Vengeance. It did, but Christian would have to share the spotlight with Chris Jericho, who was inserted into the mix, making it a triple threat. After eating the pin in the match, Christian was duly shifted over to SmackDown, where he promptly slid down the card. The mishandling of the Cena feud and lack of proper match between the two must have been a factor in his decision to leave WWE and join TNA just months later.